Hey, welcome back to the Talkin to Teen show. And today, okay, we are going to talk about red flags. So, this is red flags, of course, in dating. And I don't know if you hear your parents say this, you hear each other say this, but apparently it's something teens talk about because you guys have actually mentioned it to me. So, I'm going to talk about that today. Red flags in relationships. All right. So, yes, you can have red flags, like, if you're somewhere and there's like a creepy, icky person and you're like, ew, okay, that's like a red flag. You want to stay away from that person, don't you? Yes, you do. So, when you are in a relationship, and this is whether that person is your boyfriend or girlfriend or not, okay? So, red flags, here we go. That's not like the go sign, okay? Red flags means like, put the brakes, and you should not be doing that. You should not go there. You should not engage in that relationship, that situation, that circumstance, whatever it is. Like, no, 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 no. Turn around, stop, and go do something else. Okay. So that's what red flags are supposed to do for you, is to stop you in your tracks, turn around, and go the other direction. But I do know sometimes, you know what? You don't always do that, right? And in the midst of those red flags, sometimes people, when they're dating, and even if they're not technically boyfriend, girlfriend, they see these red flags, but you know what? Then they just want to kind of ignore them. And well, it's not really like that. They try to convince not only really themselves, right? So when you have friends telling you, what is wrong with you? Do you not see the red flags going on here? Like, it's like an alert. It's like big alarms going off. And why is it that you are the only one that doesn't see them? You're the only one that doesn't see them because you're ignoring them. You, you want the situation, the relationship, the non-relationship, whatever you want to call it, you want it to be so-called like successful. You want it to really be something it's not. So that's why when you ignore red flags, you are just ignoring the situation that's really at hand, because you are trying to convince yourself that it's not that bad. Hey, you know what? She doesn't always treat me like crap. She's not always with those red flags going off. It's not always like that. So that's kind of, guys, you try to convince yourself. Girls, you do the exact same thing. Trying to convince yourself that, he's not that bad. You just don't know him like I do. Well, you're darn right I don't. And I don't want to know him like you do, because if I'm seeing these red flags and you're not, how much more is actually taking place behind closed doors? You know, when it's just you and them in the car, when it's just you and them going somewhere, what really is going on in the relationship? Because with red flags, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, the red flags are necessarily abusive situations, but it doesn't necessarily mean when you see these red flags that it's something that you want to engage in, like with them as their character. All right. So red flags because you don't drink, they do. Those are with some red flags. The way they talk, their language is maybe extremely aggressive and very inappropriate, and you don't really, talk that way. And otherwise, you hear people speaking and talking like that, and you're like, "Oh, okay, that's just not for me." Now listen, this isn't because you're judging everybody and because you think you're better than someone, because this isn't about being better than someone else. It's about you living a different lifestyle than someone else, okay? So if these red flags are going off all the time, okay, and you have these alerts going off in your head, and you have friends telling you you should probably not be with this person. Maybe you need to listen to those people in your life that actually care about you, because sometimes the person you are with, dating, or you want that to be your boyfriend, girlfriend, they don't necessarily care about you all the time. So you need to listen to the people that actually do care about you. So when they're telling you, Man, maybe you better listen, okay? So that's even kind of what I'm saying here today. So if there's some things in your own life, in your own relationship, in your own circumstances, situation that you've noticed, and instead of doing something about it, you've kind of turned a blind eye, made a little bit of a deaf ear to it, and those people around you, that you actually maybe even stopped hanging out with the people who are voices of reason in your life, that you kind of shut them out because you want to be with this person who is really, are they that good for you? And then it becomes this, are you then that good for that person? Because maybe you're the person that is like the red flag alert that goes off when people are wanting to have this relationship. Maybe you are the one that is with all the red flags. Okay. And what are you going to do about it? Should you change that? Yeah, you should. And sometimes people, they have these, but it's because they kind of want to live on the edge, don't want anyone telling them what to do. They want to be different, and you can definitely be different. You can live, have some fun, but you don't have to just be in a constant state of chaos, or just where it's just constant even negativity all the time. And if you are with a person like that, or you are that person, okay, maybe look in the mirror and really see who you want to be. All right. And you might have to do that often. And it's okay for all of us to do those things. Okay. Look in the mirror. Who am I? Who do I want to be? What are the things that I'm actually doing? And how am I with a relationship that I'm in right now? Or the kind of person, who do I want to be when I do get in a relationship? So if I've noticed red flags about myself, what am I going to do to change it? So that's something, you know what, you do need to think about that. And hopefully you will change those things, because you shouldn't want that to be who you are. All right. I'm not talking about perfection, and I'm not talking about being better than someone else, or even that you think that other people are better than you. We don't want to be around people who think that they are better than everybody. So then you do probably tend to keep your distance. And that's not necessarily a bad thing there. But if you have these red flags going off in your own brain, okay, something you can do to change that is just that, acknowledge it, okay? Because you cannot change what you do not acknowledge. So then you think about those things that, okay, you know what, I have been this, and this. You name it, all right? Because that's for you to say what it is. I have been controlling. I have been super demanding. I have been what? All right. So, because those are things that are red flags in a relationship: pressuring, pushy, aggressive, controlling, lying, those negative things, because those are what red flags are negative um, pressures, really, I would say, and personalities, maybe, that, and I'm going to say this, that you have become that. All right. Because just the same as worry, that is a learned character trait. Those are learned things. So, what are maybe some of the learned traits that you have developed through the years? And now you're seeing, wow, who am I? When did I become this person? And now, you know what? I don't want to be that person anymore. So, again, you have to acknowledge that, right? In order to change it. So, if that is you, write down some of those things. Actually get a pen and paper, okay? Even if it's chicken scratch and you're the only one that can read it, that's all right, because it's okay if you're the only one who can read it, or even if you can't read it, okay? Just write down some of those things, that this is the person that I have become. And then on the other column, the other page, you write down the person that you want to be, okay? And that should be in a positive sense. I don't want to live and be this red flag person. Okay. Now, if you're dating someone who is red flag galore, and even though, you know what, I like red, but when it comes to red flags in someone's life, you need to be aware of those things. And then you need to think to yourself, what are my boundaries going to be? So when I date someone, and if there's someone that has these red flags, like what? They're way too controlling. No, thank you. They're way too aggressive. with the relationship, and I am definitely not ready for that. So, what are going to be your boundaries when you get into a relationship? What are going to be the things that are going to be the non negotiable things in your life and in your relationships? Okay. Because, of course, then, yeah, you have to be willing to end it, get away from me. I'm not doing this. And it's better to do these things in the beginning when you're not necessarily full fledged, dating, that this is not your boyfriend and now you've been, a couple months and now you're like, "Oh my gosh, you know what? I don't even know how to get rid of him." And guys, you're thinking she's way too controlling and I knew she was. But you know what? I stayed with her because I didn't want to be lonely. I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to be the only one doing things without a girlfriend. I got to tell you, if you're with someone that, there's constantly all these red flags going off, is it really worth it being in a relationship like that? Some of you might be thinking, well, yeah, Shauna, it is. You just said it. You don't want to be lonely. I don't want to be by myself. I don't want to be the only person. Well, you know what? Sometimes it's way better to be by yourself. And it's way better to be this lonely version of you because that's when you start to find out who you are. You start to find out what really are my boundaries when I do marry someone. Actually, you date the person first, don't you? And then you marry because you don't want to marry someone with all these red flags. Okay. You shouldn't want to anyway. So if there's all these red flags, these sirens going off all the time, you definitely need to take a hard look at the relationship of what you've compromised and who you have become that you have accepted these things that it's not really that big of a deal anymore. Because it does need to be a big deal in your life because red flags, like I said, they continue. Okay. They don't necessarily just go away. So when you're seeing the red flag, yeah, you might need to be like, okay, was that real? Was that really what it was? Am I, it's okay for you to take a little bit of time and kind of question what just happened. But if it's ongoing and it happens again, then you need to, yeah, you know what? Feel free to have a conversation about it, right? Communication is good in any relationship. So you don't necessarily just have to just end it. And then they're like, what the heck? What did I even do? That they may not even be aware of what they have done. And part of it, they might not be aware because, see, when I was talking about how some of these things have become who they are, things that have developed within themselves. And a lot of times it's because of maybe past relationships, whether it's been within their family, whether it's been with a family member, whether it's been in previous dating relationships. Well, I'm never going to be treated like that again. Well, I'm never going to let them do this to me in the next relationship I get in. So then they put these little things on themselves to protect themselves. So, and those things that they're putting on them then actually become red flags in relationships because they didn't deal with the circumstance, the situation, maybe get some professional help. And then they became this person that maybe they didn't even realize that they've become because they are trying to protect themselves. Okay. So if that is you and you need help, you know what? Hey, talk to your parents and definitely get help. All right. If you do get help, especially if you are a Jesus follower, you need to go to someone that, you know what, knows Jesus. Okay. And so a lot of times that's actually your pastor, even at your church. So that's actually an excellent place to start is with your church if you do go to church. Okay. So definitely, you know what, do not discount your church. Do not discount your pastors because that seriously is a great place to go and to be. And if you don't go to church, you don't have this, maybe you don't even know Jesus, all right? Definitely do some research. Let your parents research this person before you just jump into some counseling because sometimes the counselors you know what, it's not someone that is going to even help you in the situation that you need help in, all right? So that's just something to think about. So if you are with this person and you've noticed these red flags, okay, and now you're like, you know what? I'm not really liking this. Yeah, you need to have a conversation. All right. And if you are afraid of the person, then you definitely do need to get away from them. Okay. So if the red flags have gotten so strong, you're like, oh, holy smokes, man, I'm a little bit scared. Then yes, you do need to break up with them. And if you're going to talk to them, you might need to involve the parents in the situation. Okay. That you talk to your parents because you shouldn't be with someone that you are afraid of, and that's definitely not someone you should be dating, and I'm talking like fearful, definitely, in an abusive physical situation. Now, when I'm saying that, that's guy or girl, okay? Because girls can be very physically abusive as well. So this isn't just like the guys who can just be physical and pounding on the girlfriend. This can be girls doing that to their guys too. And guys, generally, what have you been taught? I don't hit girls. I don't do that stuff. So when your girlfriend's hitting, punching you and stuff like that, you're like, oh my gosh, where you don't know what to do. Guys, it's okay for you to end that relationship. Okay. Because it is not normal. Those are red flags. Okay. That's like that is like a giant red flag. And you don't need to stay in that relationship by any means. Do not stay. Don't think you can change them because you cannot. It's okay if they get some help, and maybe you need to say that to them, which usually, what does that do? It kind of triggers more anger, doesn't it? I don't need help. What are you talking about? I'm perfectly fine. I'm not the one that needs help. You do. Well, hey, maybe you both do. Okay. And maybe you do need help, and it's okay for you to go get help. And if they don't, okay, hey, that's not on you, is it? Because you did your part. You did what you should have done. But don't stay in a relationship like that because those red flags definitely lead to things that are extremely unhealthy, very chaotic, very damaging. And even if it's red flags in the mental game, in the mental part, because, don't they say that mental abuse is even more damaging than physical abuse? The reason why, because, messing with your head, messes with your head. And if that is a relationship that you are in, by all means, you know what? Do not stay. Okay. Do not stay in that situation. And here's the thing, a lot of times, again, people will stay because they have had sex. And that is the reason why then they stay. Well, they think they have to because especially girls tend to be way more like this than guys. I'm not saying that guys don't, but when a girl gives it up and then that's what the relationship, if he's becomes very controlling and aggressive and just flat out mean and awful, okay, whether he's playing these mental games, she tends to stay because she has had sex with him. And then that's what it does. It unites them, it joins them together, and it's harder to end the relationship because then that becomes part of the mental game. Think about that. If that is a relationship that you're in, just think about what causes the problems, what causes the anger, what causes the fighting, and then what do you do to make up for the argument? So that is unhealthy. Those are the mental games, and that's not something that you need to stay in. Okay, so this is guys, girls. All right, so I'm not just picking on one of you. I'm saying this to both of you. All right, so red flags in relationships. No, you need to skedaddle your cute little self out of there. Okay, and not stay in that relationship and in that situation. Definitely no, because red flags, anger, just out of nowhere is a red flag. All right. And if it's bad, you definitely need to involve your parents. All right. If there have been so many red flags and you are just staying in this relationship because you love them, is that really love? So I still need to do a show, don't I, about what love and infatuation is. So that's still going to be something I'm going to do. All right. So in the midst of red flags, okay, you need to be aware of the red flags and what they are. And then you need to be aware of what your boundaries are and who you want to be, who you want to date, what kind of relationship you want to have. Now, you're not going to have a perfect relationship by any means. Nothing is perfect. There are always going to be things that you have to talk about, communicate. There's misunderstandings, but it's not about you always having to be right, someone having to be right. It's because you compromise in circumstances, situations, not compromise your values. Okay. Now, that is not the same thing as you making a compromise in the relationship. You never compromise your values, especially your hardcore Jesus values. That should never be a compromise in your life and who you date. And if that person instantly, right away, if you are with someone, no matter how much you think they're cute and they're so nice, if there's no agreement in there with the Jesus part, Doesn't matter how cute they are. It needs to be a bye-bye, okay? You need to it doesn't mean you can't be friends. Doesn't mean you can't talk to the person. Doesn't mean you have to ignore them and act like they don't exist, all right? Doesn't mean that kind of stuff that you mistreat them and you're bad and horrible, all those things. You don't do that. But you know what? That's just not the person you're going to date. That's not the person that hey, maybe in 10 years, okay? Things happen, things change, and you get reacquainted and things are different. Maybe they have Jesus standards like you do now. So, you know what? But maybe that's not today. But that's a red flag for you. If you are a Jesus follower, and I'm not just saying a Christian, okay? I'm not just talking about a Christian because to me, that's not the same thing. All right. So if you truly follow Jesus and they do not, that should be a red flag to you instantly, right away. And hey, you know what? I'm sorry. You know what? I can't date this person. And hey, I think you're nice. I think you're cool. I like you, but we can't date. End of story. Okay. Because you're going to give yourself a whole lot more heartache if you do date the person. Okay. And maybe you're in that situation right now, a relationship, and you're like, Sean, it's not that bad. So, no, it isn't. So, I don't even know what you're talking about because my relationship isn't like that. Well, then how much are you this Jesus follower? And are you even listening to what Jesus is telling you, talking to you about? What is within? I'm not saying that follow your heart. What is in your heart? I'm not saying that. I'm saying what is God telling you? Okay. What is it that you read in your Bible? What is it that you're hearing from your pastor, your youth pastor, from your life, from your parents? All right. Because sometimes we date people just because they're nice. But seriously, God doesn't want a unbeliever to be dating a believer. Again, it doesn't mean you can't, be nice to them, all right? But that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be dating them because if you marry them, hey, that's two different directions. If you want to follow Jesus and you want to walk with the Lord and you have all these, Jesus plans, um, they don't. And a lot of times they don't even know what you're talking about. They don't even understand. So when you're trying to read your Bible and do those things, they don't. And they don't understand it. So then you stop reading your Bible. You stop even maybe going to church because they don't understand it. And then they're a little bit kind of like annoyed and irritated with it. Like, why does everything have to be about Jesus that you're doing? Well, because Jesus is who I am. That is part of who I am. I'm renewed because of Jesus. So when they don't understand those things, it makes it hard for a dating relationship, and it makes it 1,000 times harder if you want to marry the person. And, you know what? It's different when you're married, isn't it? Marriage is not a dating relationship to where you're like, "Well, I don't wanna be married anymore, and I'm gonna go over here and be with this neighbor person now because they love Jesus and you don't." No, it doesn't work that way. If you're married, hey, you're married, you gotta do everything you gotta do to work it out. You don't just get to, not have that marriage anymore. See, like dating, you can just undate the person, can't you? And that's not your boyfriend anymore. And that's not your girlfriend anymore, but that's not what it is for marriage. So I'm trying to make it easier for you, okay? You just make it easy on yourself and you just don't date with that red flag that they do not know Jesus, but you do. And other red flags, of course, I said, if they're controlling, they're pushy, they're aggressive, they get mad and angry very easily. Those are major red flags that you need to, no, thank you, stay away from. That is not the person for me. So, and sometimes, even though maybe you've dated a person for even, maybe let's say maybe you dated the person since 8th grade and now you just graduated high school and now you're going to go to college, which I know several people that have dated like that. And then they go to college. Of course, they don't end up getting married. They end up breaking up. And whether or not they stay friends, I don't know. Sometimes, most of the time they don't because they're completely two different directions. And even though they thought they were going to get married, and this is even within the Christian community where they were Christians. And I'm talking real Christians, okay? I'm talking that they actually loved Jesus. They didn't just say they were Christians. They actually loved Jesus and had a relationship with Jesus and dated all those years and went off to school and never, never ended up getting married, ended up marrying somebody else. So it doesn't mean that their relationship was crappy and awful and oh my gosh, full of red flags. It doesn't even mean that. Of course, I don't know. because, I didn't live with them. They were not my child, so I don't know. Only God knows and they know. But my point is, it doesn't mean that because you date someone for all your high school years and then some, that you end up marrying that person. So that's what I'm saying. So you still need to be thinking about who you do want to marry. Because again, right, we marry who we date. So who do you want to be when you are dating? What are the red flags that you definitely, and maybe you're not even familiar with red flags, but now that I mentioned a few, if you're talking with your parents, um, it's okay for you to talk to your parents about, what's a healthy relationship. Even if your parents don't have a healthy relationship, even if they're divorced, they still know what a healthy relationship is. So if you want to talk to your dad about that, you know what? Excellent. Do. You want to talk to your mom about it. I'm sure they would love to have the conversation with you. And what are red flags that I should be aware of? What are things that when I start dating or that I am dating, or if they're trying to pinpoint that out to you now, you know what? Hey, listen to them. Okay, because they're trying to help you and to steer you in a right direction. That's not a time for you to be like suddenly this rebellious teenager because you love them, that person, and they love you, but there's all these red flags going off. Um, you will eventually look back, hopefully you will, and be like, wow, okay, I guess my parents really did try to protect me from that. I was really stupid. That's why we get to have parents to help us out. And that's why, as we mature, we should be looking back and be like, oh my golly, I was dumb. How embarrassing. Hopefully, as you get older, you do see those things and you're like, wow, okay, I'm glad I'm not that person. That's why it's good to mature so that we don't stay that person as we get older. So think about who you want to be, all right? Think about those red flags and again, think about the boundaries that you want to have in your relationships and how to get rid of the red flags um, within yourself. If you are the one that kind of has the anger, you are the one that tends to be controlling, the one that tends to be pushy and aggressive. Definitely, you know what, you might need to have conversations with your parents. Definitely go ahead and get counseling. Again, think about the pastors, okay? That's who you want to talk to first is your pastors at your church. And so you can get rid of that and even talk to God about it. God, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be controlling. I don't want to be pushy. What happened in my life that I became this way because I didn't used to be like this? Sometimes, especially if you have intersex into a relationship, that is one of the main reasons why people sometimes become pushy, aggressive, and controlling is that right there, and untrusting. And now they want to know what you're doing all the time. They want to know where you are, who you're talking to, what's going on. They're like, have your social media accounts. See that those are red flags when because you can tell the difference because it's an attitude that they have, and you can tell the difference. That is not an action of love. All right. So, red flags does not mean jump in, go for it, do whatever you got to do to keep that and go after that. No, that means flee, run, hop, skip, jog the other direction. Okay. Get away from that person. Those are what the red flags is trying to tell you. So, hopefully, you will take heed to those red flags. And hopefully, you know what, you gained a little bit of some insight here today from this Talking to Teens show. And hey, you know what? I'll just see you in the next show.